we open it up for anybody that wants to talk about anything for a few minutes at the end. So just be patient. We hand out mics after the history lesson. So we started yesterday with an article that had first shown up by Dave Troy in the online medium.com. And I highly encourage you to go back if you missed that presentation and listen to it. But this is part 3. We did 1 and 2 yesterday. And this one starts out with a guy by the name of Tom Fitton, which everybody knows, and has a picture of him when he was very, very young. He was on National Empowerment Television on C-SPAN, and he was referred to back then as the Young Bloods. And in 1989, William Lind formalized the principle that he called fourth generation warfare. Without getting too technical, fourth generation warfare is about messing with the minds of opponents and getting into their decision-making process. For those of you who are familiar with John Boyd's OODA loop, OODA, it basically is getting in that process so that you can affect your enemy's thinking process. Lynn drew heavily from the ideas of Colonel John Boyd, and which basically OODA loop is the observe, orient, decide, act. And when I was a young major, this is the doctrine that was taught both at Air Command and Staff College as well as Air War College. And basically it was, you look across the horizon at what's going on, observe, orientate yourself to all of the different players. You make a decision based on everything that you see, and then you act upon that decision. There's a lot more to it, but that's kind of, there's a feedback loop in each of these processes on how to shape the battlefield. It was primarily used by pilots, but also any war planner. When you're involved in that process, that's how we were taught to think. And that's why generally, if you follow military accounts, there's little to no emotional input into it, because they have been strictly taught to kind of, that's noise, and that is to be disregarded because it's not part of an analytical process. William Lind partnered with Paul Weyrich, W-E-Y-R-I-C-H, who was the founder of the Heritage Foundation and the Council for National Policy, to bring fourth generation warfare techniques to the Republican organizing strategy. Many of the ideas they had in the early 1990s was to lay a groundwork for future generation leaders. In late 1993, Weyrich founded the National Empowerment Television, a cable channel that reached approximately 11 million homes. They had programs that were sponsored from the Family Research Council, the NRA, and the show called The Young Bloods, which is where Tom Fitton came up. What's weird, being here looking back on this, is that Nora O'Donnell was on there, Heather Newart, and Arianna Huffington. So she was on there in 1995. So this is a perfect illustration of how these people cross-pollinate. We look at them as completely separate groups, because you would never put Tom Fitton today in the same pot with Arianna Huffington, and yet they come from the same pot. Today, Tom Fitton leads Judicial Watch, that was founded in 1994 by Larry Klayman, Fitton has been one of the most vocal advocates on the right. He did not come out of nowhere. Indeed, all of them was a product of a 25-year planning process and is a direct result of this. One of the members was Charlie Kirk. And we know how he rose to prominence. They have an incubator to create these people. Over time, the principles of fourth generation warfare came to dominate Republican politics. On October 2004, Ron Susskind reported in the New York Times an anecdote about an interaction with George W. Bush, senior advisor. And this is a quote. In the summer of 2002, after I had written an article for Esquire that the White House didn't like about Bush's former communications director, Karen Hughes, I had a meeting with the senior advisor to Bush. He expressed the White House's displeasure and then told me something that at the time I didn't fully comprehend, but which I now believe gets to the very heart of the Bush presidency. The aide said that guys like me were, quote, in what we call reality-based community, unquote, which he defined as people who believe that solutions emerge from judicious study of discernible reality. I nodded and murmured something about Enlightenment principles. He cut me off. He says, that's not the way the world really works anymore, he continued. We're an empire now. And when we act, we create our own reality. And while you're studying that reality judiciously, as you will, we'll act again, creating new realities, which you can study too. And that's how things will sort out. We're history's actors, and you, all of you, will be left to just study what we do, unquote. And that really goes to the heart of the way these people think. This exchange captures exactly what fourth generation warfare is all about. It's about creating reality and forcing others to react to it. It puts everyone else at a strategic disadvantage. In 1980, the Council on Foreign Policy and its magazine called Foreign Affairs was one of the most influential policy crafting organizations in the country, if not the world. While it maintained a liberal orientation, its open membership and wide-ranging mission as a think tank allowed it to secure a tax-exempt status. Paul Weyrich and his allies, direct mail wizard Richard Viguerie, and constitutional lawyer Phyllis Schlafly, decided that they needed a comparable organization in order to advance their long-term strategies. So in 1991, they created the Council for National Policy as a long-term counterweight. It was funded by Weyrich's patrons, the Hunt brothers and Joseph Corr. And we've uncovered both of their connections to funding Operation Gladio via the World Anti-Communist League American branch, with whom Weyrich had founded the Heritage Foundation, Western Goals, and Alex with similar objectives. And again, we've went through all of these. Western Goals is the organization that Jack Singleb was in charge of, that Larry McDonald was in charge of, that are all tied back to spying on America. This is not a right-wing, left-wing thing. This is all of these people against all of us. But in the CNP was something of a different beast from anything that had been previously tried by Weyrich and his allies. Think tanks like Heritage Foundation were one thing, but CNP was all about action. The goal was to network powerful individuals, place them in long-term success, and enact specific policies to achieve clear outcomes. CNP in its early days was a hotbed of fundraising for conservative causes like the Nicaraguan Contras, and Jack Singleb and Oliver North were participants and speakers in many of the early meetings. While the CNP met only a few times a year, its membership was secret. It was laying a groundwork for decades of conservative activism. Other CNP participants in years to come was Kellyanne Conway, Steve Bannon, Herman Cain, Ted Cruz, Brent Broswell, Betsy DeVos, Eric Prince, Tom Fitton, all of these people. And by 2017, the membership would include one more figure prominently associated with January 6th, Ali Akbar, who, as he has become more popularly known, Ali Alexander. The night before the 2016 election, a PAC ran by Alexander and co-founded by his old friend Larry McDonald's Roger Stone received $60,000 from Robert Mercer. His group was called Stop the Steal. They issued guidance on November 7, 2016. Your help is needed, it is respected, and it is appreciated. Stone and Alexander revived Stop the Steal in 2018 as well, particularly in Florida, where they rallied around a ballot recount in a U.S. Senate race between Rick Scott and Bill Nelson. And in fact, Stone was practicing this as early as 2000 in Florida during the Bush v. Gore case. By 2020, Alexander and Stone had a well-oiled machine at the ready to organize around the October 3rd election. The CNP leadership had decided as early as February 2020 that the election would need to be contested at state levels. Okay, that was the end of that part 3. So I'm going to I got to go back to get to the other sections. Let me get to part 4. I always want to read what other people write about each other. That's kind of how you get to the truth. Anti-communist, this is the start of part 4. Anti-communist hardliners in the military and intelligence community have been in conflict with the idea of civilian oversight for decades. The novel 7 Days in May, released in September 1962, depicts this conflict in detail. A film adaptation began production in '63 called The Business Plot. It was exposed by Major General Smedley Butler, who is one of my all-time favorite guys. The John Birch Society, created in the late 1958 by publisher Robert Welch, the same Welch we were just talking about, and other co-founders like oil magnate Fred Koch, had been gaining in influence. The group was named after John Birch, who had served as a military intelligence officer in China during World War II. And then in August of 1945, he served in the OSS Military Intelligence Division, which later became the CIA. And why is that important? Because this puts him in the location of where the OSS was partnering with Chiang Kai-shek, which was the drug warlord in China fighting Mao. He later goes on to basically control, like in the immediate aftermath of World War II, the 90% of the world's opium supply. And these people are all associated with this. Birch was killed by Chinese communists in late August 1945, and Welch wanted to make sure his story lived on forever. He wrote a biography of Birch in 1954 and then formed the Society in 1958. General Edwin Walker met Welch in 1959 and became well known for his anti-communist rhetoric, going so far as to claim President Eisenhower was a communist, citing his continuance of support for the New Deal programs. And Edwin Walker becomes infamous because he's the guy that claims that Lee Harvey Oswald attempted to assassinate him, which was necessary in order for the whole JFK cover-up to work. In late 1961, Walker began his political career. In February 1962, he had launched a campaign to become governor of Texas. His rhetoric had attracted the praise of American Nazi Party leaders, a fact that did not go unnoticed by Kennedy. President Kennedy offered director John Frankenheimer support in making 7 Days in May, including permission to film scenes around the White House while Kennedy was on vacation. The film was released in February 1964, just months after Kennedy's assassination, to critical acclaim. The plot centers on the attempted military takeover of the U.S. government by the Joint Chiefs of Staff in a secret military base where resources were being staged. The president discovered the scheme, fired those involved in the conspiracy, and opted to keep the details secret, lest its exposure would reveal the country's internal weakness to the Soviet Union. The plotters, led by General James Mattoon Scott, were concerned that the president was being too soft on the Soviets, but the real conflict was over democracy or fascism, as illustrated by the below scene. You guys are not even, those of you who've been with me for a long time are going to just die when I read this scene to you, which is what cinched doing this series, because it's crazy. General James Mattoon Scott says, James Mattoon Scott, as you put it, hasn't the slightest interest in his own glorification, but he does have an abiding interest in the survival of the country. The president in this scene's name is Jordan Lyman. Not even kidding. He says, then by God, run for office. You have such a fervent, passionate, evangelical faith in this country. Why in the name of God don't you have any faith in the system of government you're so hell-bent to protect? Now, why is that all important? For those of you who are new, you will understand that the plot of this movie about the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff having a secret military base where resources are being staged is Operation Gladio. And Lyman Lemetsker, weirdly enough, the president's name is Lyman, like there's no connection there at all. Lyman Lemetsker was a 4-star Army general that wrote Operation Northwood, which was a document that talks about conspiring from using secret stay behind capabilities, i.e., like the Cuban exiles dressed up as Cuban army people under the direction of Fidel Castro, coming into the United States, using the Cuban exiles that are already here, being trained by the CIA, to orchestrate terror events inside the United States by bombing large cities, flying drone aircraft. He had a whole slew of options in this plan to wreck all kinds of domestic terror events, blame it on Cuba so they could justify a full-scale ground invasion of Cuba. That's called Operation Northwood. So the fact that this movie basically reincarnates what Kennedy was actually doing at the time. He fired Lyman Lemetsker. He had just fired Allen Dulles after he found out all of the stuff and the scheming that he was doing. And then we know that months later he was dead. So they definitely, they didn't decide to run for office. They just decided to get rid of him. So the tension captured in 7 days between fascism and democratic principles continues to this day, often defying strict party lines. It does not, and that's my point that I keep telling everybody, and I make it several times a day. This has zero to do with party lines. Zero. After World War II, there was an effort to create international fascism. That's the real reason all of the Nazis were ferried out of Germany all over the world, not just scientists. People get stuck on the, oh, you're talking about Operation Paperclip. No, I'm not. That is like a shiny object over here that dealt just with the scientists. I'm talking about Reinhard Gehlen, who Allen Dulles installed as his counterpart in the West German BND, running their entire intelligence apparatus. I'm talking about Otto Skorzeny, who set up shop in Spain, who was training all of these stay-behind terrorist organizations. They literally put Nazis everywhere. And it wasn't just Hitler that had fascists. The entire country of Japan was ran as a fascist dictatorship as well, and all of those people survived. There wasn't a damn one of them that was hung after World War II. Yes, they had a few token ones that they offered up to the sacrificial lowercase god that they worship, Satan, in Germany. But basically, they had the same show trial in Japan, and they held not a single high ranking officer responsible for any of it. I guess it's just coincidental. I don't know if you guys can hear it in the background, but there's a whole bunch of B-52s coming back to Barksdale. So anyway, the tension captured in 7 days didn't stay within party lines. The John Birch Society Network has had allies inside government and in industry, while those inclined towards civilian control or who are otherwise competing with Birch-aligned networks have their own goals and centers of power. The idea of civilian control has always been accomplished by an exaggerated fear of communists. That goes to the point that I make constantly, that they have to have a boogeyman. They are the ones that created the Bolshevik Revolution. They funded it out of New York and the city of London. So they always have to have something that they can tell you that you have to be afraid of. They do this so champions of congressional oversight and of democratic processes are always viewed as the control mechanism, that they're going to affect laws based on the boogeyman wherever he is. That's how we got the Patriot Act after 9/11. Because after the Soviet Union fell, the boogeyman became radical Islamic terrorism, and they will use Islamic terrorists that they train to go around and do terrorist events in order to create that new boogeyman so that they can enact more legislation that takes away more of our freedoms and rights. Truman and Eisenhower were disliked because of their support for the New Deal programs, and Ike earned special ire for his warnings about the military-industrial complex. And as you guys know, that was not a warning. That was a statement of fact that he had created this military-industrial complex during his 8 years in office. And his vice president during his 8 years in office was Richard Nixon. He was part of setting up this entire system. Nixon was disliked because he pushed the country even further off the gold standard, ending the convertibility of dollars into gold and introducing market interventions such as wage and price controls. Ford continued most of Nixon's policies. The election of Ronald Reagan, however, introduced a new era of opportunity. Weyrich, Singleb, and other hardliners in the intelligence community rallied around Reagan's staunch anti-communist stance, even as they were increasingly constrained by Congress controlled by the Democrat Party. Undeterred, they initiated a series of covert programs ranging from Western goals to Council for National Policy, Iran-Contra, BCCI, which is the bank that was set up, and it's called a Pakistani bank, but it was actually licensed in Luxembourg and ran out of the city of London. And BCCI, like Nugent Han and Castle Bank, were CIA banks in order to money launder their drug trafficking, weapons trafficking, and human trafficking cash in order to be able to use it for funding these covert operations. And it also included the banking mess of the savings and loan crisis from 1986 to 95. And we went over that as well. That all was money laundering as well. The goal was to fight communism globally by any means necessary, including at home. Narratives connected to the CNP's 2020 election strategy promoting Republican votes involved COVID, the denial of Trump's loss, and have enjoyed considerable support from former intelligence and military professionals, which of course we know because we've watched them all. And of course, he only labels the Republicans that were involved in that, but there was the entire cadre of Democrats that were as well. And again, that's why it's critical that we read both sides of this, because when people that are liberal, right, anti Republican documents, it doesn't mean they're not true. You just have to look past their bias. In a network, and many of them frequently referenced each other's posts and appearances on internet videos and podcasts. And this is not an exhaustive inventory of the people that he listed, because, of course, he didn't list any Democrats. NPR noted that the arrests made in the days following January 6th, about 1 in 5 had connections to the military. Yeah, because we're patriotic. And then he goes on and redescribes what we all know about January 6th and some of the accusations. Multiple media outlets are aware of the disinformation that was being pushed, citing concerns of mental health of subjects. And he does say that a full congressional investigation needs to be done, which, of course, not the fake one that was done before. And he also says that the government can be used, including the CIA, to radicalize domestic audiences. In late 2016, a group of Native people and their allies began organizing Standing Rock, South Dakota, to oppose the planned Dakota Access Pipeline. Their protest movement, organized as water protectors under the banner No DAPL. The protest, which lasted for months and was quickly infiltrated by private military contractors, notably a firm called Tiger Swan, which is a spinoff of Eric Prince's military contracting firm Blackwater. They deployed a range of covert operations designed to break up protesters so the pipeline could continue. Prince happens to be a member of this group and has a long history of operations in the covert nature. A Jesuit-backed organization known as Romero, R-O-M-E-R-O, Institute, named for a Catholic archbishop in El Salvador assassinated in the 1980 by death squads, was also involved in running opposing operations, which had their own issues at Standing Rock. The Romero Institute is a project of Danny Sheehan, a Jesuit-backed lawyer who had had another notable brush in the spotlight. In the wake of Iran-Contra, he sued Jack Singleb, Oliver North, and a long list of other participants in the affair under the banner of a different Jesuit-backed organization, the Christic Institute, which we've come across in Operation Gladio as well. You may now detect a theme. Iran-Contra, Standing Rock both contain deep conflict between Jesuit-backed left-leaning factions versus right-wing business interests backed by Opus Dei and connected to the prince and his peers. And again, this is known as the strategy of tension. Even strangers, we know from multiple firsthand accounts that operatives and January 6th filmmaker were also involved in operations at Standing Rock. Iran-Contra alumnus Bud McFarland wrote in 2006 that it would be advantageous to get access to Russia's oil reserves, much of which is concentrated in the Arctic shelf. For this to be possible, climate change would need to be discontinued. Blocking climate change would thus mean constraints to be able to access oil. And he has an excerpt of McFarland's statement, which I think is very important. The second is Russia. Russia possesses some 30% of the world's natural gas reserves. Natural gas has demonstrated capacity to generate electrical power and fuel transport. Today, there is more than 600 trillion cubic feet of gas in the Yamal Peninsula. None of this gas is currently being exported, and it would be enormously expensive to link this region into Russia's existing pipeline network. But the peninsula is well suited to become a major center of production of liquefied gas. With temperatures at 20 below zero, it is much cheaper to liquefy gas here than in Qatar or Nigeria or Trinidad. It is a 3,800-mile trip from Yamal to terminals in the Canadian maritime provinces where the gas can be piped into North America. 1/3 of the distance to ship natural gas from Qatar to the Western Hemisphere. Finally, it should be noted that there are very few terrorists in Russia's Arctic Circle, unlike oil and gas in the Persian Gulf. Now you know why they want Russia so bad. McFarlane was present at Trump's foreign policy speech to allies, including Russian Ambassador Kislyak, on April 27, 2016, at Washington's Mayflower Hotel. Subsequent deals involving Russia oil and gas firms may have been advanced by McFarlane's advocacy, which is why they will drive a wedge into any president in the United States that tries to deal fairly with Russia. That's why Russia, throughout the entire campaign in 2016, was demonized. So they want it for themselves. They don't want Russia to be able to profit off of Russia's resources. They want to overthrow the government of Russia so that they can profit off of that. That's what all of these regime change garbage things are all over the world. They do not want the country of origin to benefit from their own resources. Okay. It also talks about the Second Vatican Council, which resulted in a sweeping set of reforms introduced by the Roman Catholic Church, which many consider to be too progressive. While there are many Catholic traditionalists who might prefer to return to the rituals of the Latin Mass, he says Steve Bannon is trying to drive a wedge in between of the Jesuits and the traditionalists. I don't agree with that. And he points out that Steve Bannon's embracing of Vigiano, who I think is awesome, is one of those ways of doing it, which of course he wants. Steve Bannon wants a more conservative Catholic Church, which is true to its original doctrine. Bannon's efforts to, that's pretty much all it says. And then the next section of this article is Meet the Octopus. With the convergence of intelligence, oil interest, and the Catholic Church, we arrive at what some call the octopus. The outside of its retail offerings, the Catholic Church has two major lines of business, banking and global intelligence. As such, it is the largest and oldest entity in the world. It should not be surprising that it has developed factions and long-standing alliances with global entities. And of course, we take the origins of Operation Gladio, the Catholic Church, through the rat lines of dressing up Nazis in priest clothing to get them out of Germany, to the money laundering of, before we set up the BCCI and Nugent Hand and Castle Bank, the Vatican was doing all of the money laundering of the drug operations for the CIA. And that's all well established in Paul Williams' book, Operation Gladio. And oh, by the way, he's a Catholic. So he's not anti-Catholic. It's just a proven fact that the Sedona, Calvi, all of those people were involved in the Catholic Church. They even set up front companies that assisted the Vatican Bank in the money laundering. So he goes on to say, we are not the first to encounter the octopus. The reporter named Danny Casolaro found it in 1991, but died in apparent suicide. No, he was suicided the night before he was supposed to meet with a source. An artist named Mark Lombardi found it in late 1990s and died of an apparent suicide. Again, he was suicided as well in March of 2000. A woman named Rachel Begley found it in 2007 when she wondered about her father's 1981 murder in Southern California. Danny Sheehan of the Jesuit Romero Institute is still talking about it. Supporters of Smedley Butler even talked about it in 1934. There isn't much evidence to suggest that Casaleiro and Lombardi's deaths are suspicious. Only the fact that he severed both hands and couldn't have used the other hand to cut the other hand. Nothing about that suspicious. It's like a suicide with two bullet holes in your head. So anyway, yeah. And he goes on to say, maybe they were just disillusioned once they found the octopus and felt overwhelmed. Yeah, I don't think so. In December 2020, attorney Sidney Powell promised to unleash the Kraken, which was another kind of interesting analogy to the octopus, and also had, let's see, whether Powell intended to invoke the octopus or not, historic evidence suggests that the events that culminated in January 6th were rooted in a long-standing conflict between powerful networks. No kidding, Sherlock. It was an Operation Gladio event as well. So that's the end of that article. Let me get back up here. Oh goodness, he's going to go into QAnon as well. That ought to be fun. I didn't read that part ahead of time. I've read all of it except for that part. So we'll be surprised together. Today, when people talk about molestation, they are almost always talking about sexual molestation. I'm not sure what else there is, but okay. There wasn't always the case. In the past, it had been connected to something called paleoconservative political philosophies. In libertarianism, molestation is described as the subversion of the will of another. If someone has a cookie and someone else takes it, the taker is molesting the cookie owner. That's ridiculous. One of the best known advocates of this concept was Robert Lafari. He lectured extensively on this idea of non-aggression principles. He was a libertarian thinker, and the followers of this philosophy, taxation is a kind of aggression, as was any sort of intervention of any kind, to the point where government itself was seen as a violation of one's individual rights. That's called anarchism, not molestation. And he goes on to make that point. Lavari was extremely influential and advanced in his philosophy to high-profile students through multiple education institutes that he founded. Some of them are called the Freedom School, Rampart College, the Rampart Institute. He also recruited people like Ludwig van Mises, Milton Friedman, Rose Wilder Lane as teachers. And he goes on to say that he was also affiliated with people that had very close ties to the John Birch Society. Jane Meyer reported in her book, Dark Money, that Lafari recruited one follower who would go on to become very influential, Charles Koch. Through his father's Fred connections to the John Birch Society, Robert Love of the Love Box Company introduced Charles to Lafari's school. Koch would go on to provide financial support to the Freedom School and also to serve as an executive and trustee. Another notable graduate of the Freedom School was Carrie Thornley, one of the founders of Discordianism, a kind of parody religion which exerted outsized influence in cultural movements. But before Lavari founded the Freedom School and a brief stint in the U.S. Army Air Corps, he had been indicted in 1940 for his participation in the I Am movement, along with its founders, Guy and Edna Ballard. According to Meyer, the I Am movement was a movement that worked audiences into frenzies as they chanted in response to Franklin and Eleanor Roosevelt's names. Annihilate them was the chant. Wow. The growth of I am activity was closely aligned to the rise of American fascism in the 1930s. The mighty I am movement persists today in the form of St. Germain Foundation, based near Chicago, as well as through other branches of the Church Universal and Triumph, located in Montana. And the reason why I find this completely fascinating is Bridget and I have found in many of the um, research projects is you have these what I'm going to refer to as fringe religious movements that radicalize people, and they're then used as a true religion when they are not. They're radical, infiltrated, on purpose movements to demonize Christianity. And that's critically important. And one of the reasons why, when I came across this, many of you have stories, because that's how we found out half of what we know, of different affiliations, family members being brought into some of these radical movements, and have shared stories with us that we can then share as to everyone, that allows people to understand. Because if you zoom out to the 30,000 foot view, what they are doing is demonizing Christianity as a total. And there's a war on Christianity, and we've said that many times in this study. And it is, and all religions have been infiltrated and used to promote these people's radical craziness. But the Christian church has been particularly vulnerable in the United States. But it's not unlike them having pedophiles in the Catholic Church and doing nothing with it. And what that does is it demoralizes the people that are Catholics so that they don't want to support their church. And you can say whatever you want about the Catholic religion, but any infiltration and non-accountability across the board in a particular church has a devastating effect on everybody around them. And they're very good at that. All right, going on. Cancel culture. For centuries, there's been periodic allegations that Jewish people murder Christians, especially children, for blood sacrificial reasons, and has persisted despite denials and official repudiation of that claim. Around 1902, a new piece of propaganda called the Protocols of the Elder of Zion appeared in Russia and was disseminated around the world. And it talks about today's Holocaust deniers, such as David Icke, strongly assert that the protocols are true. Both the blood libel and protocols have been incorporated into many modern day people's thinking. And it says that a Capitol police officer had been suspended after it was seen that he had a copy of it on his desk, because we wouldn't want anybody to understand what people who believe that that is true, having a copy as a police officer on your desk so that you could try to understand that concept is just crazy to me. In recent years, we have seen the rise of cancel culture and using alleged abuse of children like Woody Allen and Harvey Weinstein and Bill Cosby as kind of the front-facing face of that. In a 2001 paper commissioned by fourth-generation architect Paul Weyrich and William Lind, and authored by Catholic activist Eric Hubeck, offered a preview of what would become cancel culture. This is a quote: "Our strategy will be to bleed this corrupt culture dry," the document declares. "We will pick off the most intelligent and creative individuals in our society, the individuals who help give credibility to the current regime. Our movement will be entirely destructive and entirely constructive. We will not try to reform the existing institutions. We only intend to weaken them and eventually destroy them. We will maintain a constant barrage of criticism We will attack the very legitimacy, and we will use guerrilla tactics to undermine the legitimacy of a dominant regime. Now, obviously, that can be written to apply to either one. And what they are saying in that excerpt is the Phoenix program: burn it to the ground and rebuild. That's the same principle of build back better, and it cuts across both aisles. So moving on, let's see what they say about QAnon. One of the central narratives in the QAnon myth is that a cabal of satanic pedophiles run the world and drink the blood of terrified children in order to get adrenochrome, enabling them to live forever. This is, of course, nonsense. While no one is sure of the exact origin, by 2020 it had crawled from the sewer of obscurity to earn an endorsement of former military and intelligence professionals, which I don't know of any of them that actually endorsed it. As a matter of fact, they've all said that they didn't endorse it. But of course, he mentions General Flynn here because he was seen reading the Pledge of Allegiance in a photo that was then placed on one of the Q boards. So that's their analogy for how they connect General Flynn to the Q movement. Investigations into Q have shown that Robert David Steele pushed the Pizzagate child sex abuse scandal as far back as 2016. Thomas Schoenberger, another person cited in investigations and linked to General Flynn through mutual associates as far back as 2010, also have been linked to this. Lisa Clapier, known as Snow White 7IM, also promoted the IM cult content and was part of Occupy LA in 2011. Another guy, Manuel Chavez, known as Defango, worked with Schoenberger on an internet puzzle called Kedada 3302. He was also linked to Brittany Kaiser, who was on the Obama campaign, and she later worked at Cambridge Analytica. So again, you see that these people cross both sides of the aisle because Cambridge Analytica was part of the attack on Donald Trump. So it goes on to talk about a connection between Steele, Clapier, and Forrest Gamble, the heir to Procter & Gamble fortune, and them making a film that had to do with all of this stuff. So it's all linked together. It's just crazy. Whoever thought that you could link QAnon and Procter & Gamble, but there you have it. All right, last one. We've got 10 minutes. I'm sure we can get through it. As early as February 2020, with the pandemic looming on the horizon as a huge potential liability for the Republicans, the Council for National Policy, CNP, identified 3 strategies to avoid a loss. The first involved expanding the use of Republican votes. The second was to mobilize supporters in swing states to ignite a Tea Party-like environment. And the third was to deploy physicians with dubious credentials to dismiss the dangers of COVID-19, which I don't know of anybody that dismissed the dangers of it. As a matter of fact, they were basically trying to give people aid. But again, this is someone from a liberal slant. It wasn't a great...
Colonel Towner, I have so much to add to this.
Continue,
okay, please.
It wasn't a great strategy, and they knew that they had a weak hand. They figured that the only solution would be to somehow prevent the certification of the vote. In April 2020, shortly after Easter, and after just about a month of lockdowns, coordinated protests emerged in 18 states. Filmmaker Mickey Willis, a propagandist who had been associated at Standing Rock, released a propaganda film called Plandemic in April featuring Judy Mikovits. Violence over the summer in response to the murder of George Floyd, which, by the way, was completely an Operation Gladio, helped crystallize Antifa as a rhetorical foil for any right-wing factions such as the Proud Boys, 3%, Oath Keepers, despite a false equivalence. While there had been established white supremacist group for many years, the anti-fascist groups had a shorter history. Like that makes any difference in the world. There's always going to be something on the proverbial right and something on the proverbial left in order to generate chaos. That's what they do. Meanwhile, leading CNP figures had began to realize that they would need to deploy a full range of capability to counter the election. Also, in February 2020, CNP member Lisa Nelson, who was the CEO of American Legislative Exchange Council, launched a strategy to push to ensure state legislatures knew they would be part of any strategy to challenge the electoral vote and that they planned to challenge individual secretaries of state. The network behind January 6th had been coalescing between 2018 and 19 in meetings of the CNP. And again, they show no proof of that at all. There's no footnote or anything. And it goes on to say that the Phyllis Schlafly's Eagle and also Singleb's own group was involved, and that Mike Cernovich, Jim Hoff, and all of those other people were at some of these meetings. But all they show is an awards dinner to basically lump them all in the same category. In 2019, there was another gathering that included Scott Pressler, Ollie Alexander, Brandon Strada, Jack Posobiec, blah, blah, blah. And again, it's just a dinner. Jack Posobiec first signaled the intention to pursue a stop the steal strategy. 2 months later, when the election was called for Joe Biden on Saturday, November 7th, let's see, the CNP network and its allies were fully activated. On November 10th, Trump installed 4 loyalists at the Pentagon, which we know was Ezra Cohen Wapnick, and Anthony Tata, and Kash Patel, and Michael Ellis. And he's basically making the argument that this was like some groundswell blitzkrieg kind of event in order to quote unquote stop the steal, which of course we now know was completely legitimate, and the fact that they did. But what I feel most interesting about this is how some of these people who we later came to question ourselves looks to have been insiders in this operation, leading the narrative. And like the one chick, whatever her name is, who submitted false affidavits to derail Sidney Powell's contesting of a couple of the elections in a couple of different states, all seem to have been part of this behind the scenes movement of challenging all of this. And it looks like while he's trying to make the argument that the nefarious part of it was the people that were actually challenging the election, I would make the counter argument that there were a lot of people that came to fame just prior to all of this happening that were embedded in the Stop the Steal initiatives that later we have all come to realize were plants inside of that movement to derail any effectiveness that they had over it. And so again, the rest of it is basically just a summary. But I like this article from the perspective that he is naming names. And that's why I like to show you guys both sides of these arguments, because the right's never going to name the names of the right, and the left's never going to name the names of the left. So when you read both sides of them, you end up with a complete picture of just how infested both sides and how bad both sides really are. And that's why you can't shy away from some articles that are very, very revealing just because it hurts your feelings, because it's talking about people that you may know and like. So, with that said, Stellar, go ahead.
Okay, so when I was coming into the awakening of like the children and stuff like that, I was aware of like the banking and financial side of stuff. So I was kind of watching like the overall, not as specific as like you, oh, War Hamster's in here, and War Hamster have broken down all this stuff. But I have noticed, I had seen those things, and so how I had heard about Robert David's, because I did follow him, and he and 107 would get together, and there was the Charlie Ward group, and then there was Negative 48, whom I had met, different, he was strange, but that's where I had learned about the child trafficking and how really infested our government was, and like these different organizations like is being exposed like through the USA and stuff, and then the fall of the cabal lady. So they were screaming at the very beginning, like the COVID stuff. I mean, they were kind of guiding people, those of us that were waking up during that time, and I was teaching people about the ISOs, crypto and stellar and stuff. Well, anyway, so I used to follow these people. There's a whole group of people that used to do that, and they were very, I mean, in some respects, because I do realize that everything is a psyop and stuff, and it had not realized how all these things kind of intertwined with each other. But used to use the 80-20 rule, take everything at 80%, because they do tell you quite a bit of truth and help you expand with your searching and stuff like that. And then that's how, actually, it was through them that I learned about the Q movement and stuff. So it's kind of weird how the psyop within the psyop has actually helped to make me more aware. And then with you, seeing and being able to connect the dots with the Operation Gladio, and how those past things are still in play today, and all these connections is just very, very mind-blowing. That's all I want to say.
Yeah, it is. Death Blossom over on Rumble said, I joined the Birch Society in 1996, and my liberal dad almost had a heart attack. I love it.
Well, I do remember during that time too, there was, we all love General Flynn, and I actually absolutely love him. But I mean, that's where I learned about General Flynn. And again, this is even before the Q movement stuff. Watching his, like those hearings and stuff. Well, not watching because they censored it, but they let us listen to it. And just how everything was just really not making sense. And then just noticing just a lot of different things, But it's kind of interesting how, to be honest with you, all of that other stuff got me onto X, and then eventually found you. So thank you for the psyop, whoever did it, for helping to awaken me and connect the dots and connecting me to Colonel Towner.
Yes, thank whoever did that. It's definitely been a long journey for all of us, and you really have to listen to a wide range of people in order to discern the truth yourself. You should not select someone and then only follow that one person. It is not part of what the lessons that you should be learning. I don't agree with anybody that I appear with on podcast 100% of the time. And I am also very, very selective of who I will go on a podcast with, because I have been approached by a lot, I'm not going to say a lot, several people whose message I absolutely disagree with. And I don't know what their motive is in asking me to be on the show, but I can't afford to be on some people's show and then Operation Gladio be cast in the same shadow of whatever it is they're saying when I vehemently disagree with 90% of what they're saying. It, I just can't do that. We have spent too much time and too much money invested in exposing this particular um, hidden history that I can't do it to all of you. I can't do it to myself. We've made a lot of sacrifices, and that's the reason why I don't appear on some of the people's shows that have asked me to do that. I'm not saying anything about them. Just personally, I don't agree with what they say, and I don't want Operation Gladio and the revelation of this mountain of information to be tainted by their opinions. And I also, that's another thing that I've come to realize. A lot of people, no matter how well read they are, um, talk a lot about their opinions. I try to stick to, and you guys have heard me say this repeatedly when I'm asked to talk about current events and predict the future. I don't like doing that at all. I don't know about the future. I don't even know. I can tell you based on past operations how they run and what that would look like today. I don't consider that a forecast. I don't consider that the resolution to what's going to happen in the future. But again, I don't think any of this is about our opinion. It is about revealing the truth that has been hidden from us. So take that for whatever it's worth. Go ahead, Stellar.
Well, the Robert David Steele did say that he was CIA and he was like a whistleblower, and he would have podcasts and talking about these different things, and he always talked about the children and stuff like that, like what was being done. He enlightened about the art, you know, he's dead now. He was anti-pharmaceutical. He did enlighten me as far as the corruption before your stories and proofs and stuff like that. The international committee or something like that with the child pedophilia. Supposedly, I don't know if any of that stuff is real or not, but he, was a part of these different things, and then supposedly ended up getting COVID. People were trying to get, and that was also really eye-opening. I don't think he got the jab, but he ended up getting sick, went into the hospital, and then around the time that he died, that's when a lot of the stuff came out regarding remdesivir and the endocrine system, how it was meant to kill us to begin with and stuff. But a lot of different things, like he would talk about if I can ever find any of the old videos or something like that, I might send them over to you. It used to be on YouTube, but I'm sure it's been scrubbed. He also opened my eyes to a man named Torrey Smith, I believe, and he was out of Indiana, who was doing a lot of exposure with the underground trafficking through Pence, and really named out stuff. And literally his dead man switch came out after he died, but within 3 weeks you literally saw him go from a normal sized person all the way down to literally nothing. And so it's just really interesting how some of these psyops brought to other things to enlighten and educate people to see how just how crazy, and even like with the money and the funds and the NGOs, it's just amazing how the psyop kind of backfired.
Yeah. Bridget, go ahead.
And just as a side note, Stellar, I don't know if you knew this, David Steele, is also Greg Phillips' cousin from True the Vote. They're first cousins. So just an interesting sidebar.
That's really weird.
Yeah.
I didn't know that. Wow. And yeah, True the Vote, all that, there was so much stuff within the election fraud thing too. He seemed to be, if he was still a bad guy, he really opened eyes to a lot of the stuff that was going on, and it just, when you're waking up to all of the corruption and things like that. As I said, I'm so thankful for you guys, because it's like all of this is, throughout all the years. I mean, this was the first time I'd ever heard of anything like that. Like you said, the 80-20 rule. Because I do realize everything was a psyop, but you have some truths here, you have some truths here, you have some truths here that takes you down all these different tunnels. And like what you've enlightened on is, that it is the Operation Gladio, and these operations are still ongoing. We're seeing it here on X. We're seeing how, they're trying to do the division within, MAGA, the warmongering and then told you so. And, thank goodness Ian Carroll got discredited, but you know what I'm trying to say, right?
Yeah, we know what you're trying to say, Stellar. And thank you for saying it. Yeah, I mean, you have to take everything. I don't know whether he's legitimate or not, because they run people at you with the label as a whistleblower that will come out and tell you the same thing happens with the congressional hearings, right? The commissions and the investigations. They will release just enough to satisfy you that they've done something, but what they didn't uncover is like the big mountain standing behind them. Or they will come out and say, and I'm not saying that that's true about Robert Steele at all, but if they come out as a whistleblower and they give you a little bit of inside baseball as the whistleblower, and then they continue with several other things that isn't like whistleblower status stuff, they've kind of gotten their street creds under the whistleblower label, but they'll throw some other stuff out that people will come along and discredit, and then that discredits the information that they supposedly exposed as a whistleblower. These guys have had 70 years of psychological training accumulated, and they know how to prey on our nature in order to do what they do. And that's why we have to get educated independent of all of them in order to be able to discern for ourselves and not be asking other people what they think. Alex X49, thank you for your Rumble rant. Everyone here is great. Thank you. You are very, very welcome. So yeah, and that's what I think. I don't mind you guys asking me what my opinion that I give online is always going to be focused around Operation Gladio and my research. And I don't mind that. That's not what I meant by that. But what I do encourage everyone to do is to use all of the material that's out there, the patterns that we have established of how they operate, and form your own opinions. That's the most important part of all of this. Do your own research, use the tools that we have talked about on here, like the Yandex browser, the archives.org, and all of those things like that. Use those tools yourself and come and present information as opposed to asking people for information. Buy books. I think that hard-covered books at some point is going to be critically necessary in order to be able to establish our real history, because once everything goes on an electric or electronic venue, it can be changed. Just like in 1984, they'll just cut it out and republish it as if it said that same thing all along, when in fact it didn't. We were at war yesterday with somebody else. So anyway, and thanks to all of you guys, we're able to do that. Oh, and I did want to mention, I noticed, I think it was yesterday or the day before, they finally, after 2 years, turned on my subscription. And somebody already subscribed, so thank you very much for doing that. But Bridget and I have been complaining about that almost nonstop, sending like in the DMs to the support people, and they would never ever get back to us about what was taking so long. So I don't know if there's a magical point where that just happens. Who knows? But I did want to mention that as well. Let's see. Um, yeah, Raptor Talon. Mom called it lifelong learning. Holy crap. Yeah, I have definitely been in a lifelong learning project. What I didn't realize is that what I found out 2.5 years ago was going to require me to relearn everything else in the other 50 plus years, which was kind of crazy. But that, oh my gosh, Bread Maker 62. Now, you guys, I have to say this, and thank you for the Rumble rant. He says, or she says, God bless you, Colonel. Thank you for all you do for us. We love you. And I love you too, Bread Maker. And more than anything, I love you for the support that you give to Alpha Warrior Show. He is such a patriot. And I wouldn't be where I am today with the audience that I have without Alpha Warrior. And Bread Maker 62 is there every single Wednesday night as part of our show. And God bless you for being there and supporting Alpha the way that you do. It is such an awesome, and now me, it's such an awesome thing. So thank you, Bread Maker, for being there and doing that. Stellar, go ahead.
So I was going to say, and when you were talking about the article and stuff and then the Q stuff, so I didn't start following like the Q post things, but a long, long, long time ago, they used to do these IQ tests. And I don't know if you guys remember that. It would be like around 2003 and 4. They would really push these different IQ tests. And then if it was more like pattern recognition and stuff like that. So I used to get bored. I used to be pregnant a lot, and I lose days. I would be up at rest.
Pregnant a lot.
So
I love it.
I was bored, and I used to do those stupid IQ tests. Well, I didn't think much of it, and then you fast forward, and I want to say probably around 2017, 2018. I was really, really into Trump, really campaign caucused in 2015, 16. I guess 2016 before the election, and getting people to, vote for Donald Trump here in a swing state, So when that all was going on Facebook, I was really active on Facebook, I'm a realtor, so I used it for marketing, but I was also one of those crazy people. And so really pushed on Trump, and even though there was a lot of people that didn't like him, but there was a man on Facebook that was showing these, and this is where the Q stuff comes in. So he would do with Donald Trump's posts or tweets back then, and they would go into this place and they would take his tweets, and then they would do stuff with it, with the timestamp, if capital letters, whatever. They did all kinds of stuff. Well, somehow it led into the back channels. Okay. And I went into there, and they said, it's really, and it was, it's really weird. So 4chan, I think it was back when it was. So I went in there, and then, they would tell you, like this area to go to, and then you would find these different, and there was all kinds of different posts. And so it was like a web of everything. And, like how this one person, his name was David Reinhardt, and, so he was teaching how to find the correct ones through Donald Trump stuff, and things like that. So it was just really interesting. So I didn't really pay much attention to the post. I just thought it was like a puzzle type of a thing, so it was kind of fun. And then that's when years later is when started realizing, what they were doing is figuring out which ones were the ones that they wanted us, through Donald Trump stuff, as well as, and Dan Scavino was another one they used to do. But it was mainly Donald Trump, and stuff, because apparently in there were so much other things. And so, it's just really amazing how, through the years, how that movement, that PSYOP, trained people however they did it, and found people enough to get into the puzzle. And, in my personal opinion, it was probably dark hat too, but I think that there was a lot of white hat information that got people to start learning how to think and do research, if that makes any sense, and then be able to connect the dots. I just think that, and then seeing what we're seeing now with the division and stuff, how they're trying to separate, like they always do, completely Operation Gladio, what's been going on for years here and stuff, and the overthrowing and coup, thinking that it would never happen in our own country, but knowing that the cancers from within. So again, just it's amazing what we're seeing, and strength through peace, precise things where everyone knew what was going on. It's just playing out, and maybe the international syndicate will finally be completely gone, and people will probably hopefully be free, and countries will be able to live just like us in freedom, if that makes sense. So
Yeah.
thank you again. I'm just grateful today. Sorry.
No, I appreciate it. I'm grateful every day that you guys tune in, and we are able to relearn our history. I'm very grateful to each and every one of you for being here and supporting this effort. It's been an amazing journey, both for me personally, and I'm excited to be here. So,
War hamster in the house.
Yeah, well, the thing is because of everything that you've been showing us and sharing, because of the history that's been faltered, I think that all of your listeners and followers and students, you've helped me have like inner peace, knowing that, just knowing that if this stuff is coming out and they're allowing people like you and Bridget and Warhamster and Alpha and all of you guys that are actually disseminating through the fog to make sure that we stay on target with what the truth is, and because we are in a war, what a glorious time to be alive.
Yeah, I agree.
Howdy.
Hi, how are you?
I'm doing great. I was listening in, and someone mentioned Robert David Steele being related to Greg Phillips.
Yeah.
That would be me. He spoke about it during an interview, meaning Greg spoke about it during an interview that was years ago, and he spoke about it at length. They were close.
I definitely need to get a video of that. And I'll tell you what, I remember that when it came out, and I couldn't source it at all. They're both from Alabama, but that's about as close as I got. And they were both in the quote-unquote conspiracy side.
He's not related to Greg Phillips.
That's what I thought, but I went and asked someone who actually knew Greg Phillips, Real Coach Mel, who's a friend of mine. She's been on my channel a few times. She wrote books about the 1871 Corporation. She knows Greg pretty well. She was at the pit.
I was there too. Robert David Steele is my cousin.
Oh, are you? Okay, is that Chad right here?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what she mentioned to me.
He was amazing. I think that if he was a PSYOP, he opened up my eyes and helped me become so aware.
Yeah. So, yeah, Chad, the fact that you're confirming what Coach Mel told me. So, yeah, it's just one of the things that's, sometimes we make connections and then they're not there, and sometimes.
So, Bridget, what video were you watching that said that? Was it actually Greg Phillips talking?
Yeah, it was. But that was, right, it was way before 2000 Mules.
That's very interesting. But it goes along with what my opinion of Greg Phillips has been from the very beginning, which is not flattering, by the way.
Well, the fact that we've got Kyle Drogo in chat, who I'm pretty confident is actually related to RDS, so that kind of verifies the homework I had done that got from Coach Mel. So glad you're in here, buddy.
Yeah, CAG's awesome.
Yeah, I didn't realize he was there.
I didn't either. He just popped right up there, and thank you for being here. Yeah,
that's all I got today.
Thank you. He's one of my favorites. He's one of the and Warhamster. He's one of those guys that when you get on the phone, we have the same conversation, him and I, for hours, like I do with you. So, yeah, he's awesome.
Well, that's a compliment.
It is a huge compliment. He is very, very smart and very, very dedicated.
And extremely talented.
Extremely talented artist. As a matter of fact, my big claim to fame when I moved Brian Cates to Lakeland, I mean, I didn't physically move him. I'm the one that kind of cheerleaded him moving to my hometown. I decorated Brian Cates' office. And so when you look at his background, and he had decided that he wanted some of his artwork. So I'm the one that took his art, CAG, your art, to my local frame shop, got it framed, and decorated Brian's entire office for him. And I put your print so that no matter which camera he uses, your print is in the background. One of the, either the one of General Flynn or the one of Trump. And that's my big claim to fame, is decorating Brian Cates' office. And also, Brian Cates was the very first podcast I ever went on. He talked me into doing my very first one, and here I am 2 years later. So, yeah, it's a very small world and a very wonderful world to be in. Everybody are extremely big patriots, and I'm flattered that I get to be a part of it. CAG, do you want to say anything? Oh, he's already dropped down. All right. Well, if you guys don't know about his art, please go check out his X profile. He is amazing. And I know he doesn't have a speaker anymore, but I'm going to brag on him some more. Trump just hung his paint or print painting, whatever it is, in one of the Trump properties of the day that Trump got shot. Go ahead, CAG. He wants to come back up. Tell us about that. Where did that painting get hung?
Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
People couldn't hear me.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, cool. Yeah, thank you so much, by the way. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
I wanted to say about the Greg Phillips thing. He told me, I met him with Mel down at the Florida thing, and he told me that he actually met Robert David Steele years and years, like during the 2020 election. Pretty crazy story. Lots of stuff is. I still won't speak negatively. We'll see what happens. I know there's a lot of mixed opinions on him.
Yep.
There's definitely some questions, but so we'll see if it's true or not. But he told me in 2020 that him and Robert met. He went to meet Robert at his house, and they left cell phones in the house and walked into the woods to have a conversation, like some real cloak and dagger spy shit. But he's made some pretty big claims before. We'll see what's true or not. I don't know, but that's what he told me. And he told me that he was hanging around Charlie Ward and all the shills to basically map out their network and infiltrate it, and so that gave me some hope, because I was really hesitant to. I actually only met him once when I was a kid, and I was hesitant to reach back out to him because of all the Charlie Ward stuff. I was like, man, maybe he never retires. What the hell? But it was a relief when Greg told me that. But now I don't know what the hell it is. We'll see what happens. But yeah. Anyway, thank you for the nice words on my art. That was such a huge honor that painting was hung. It's hung at Trump National in LA. I think it probably would have been hung. I'm not going to say too much. I'm going to watch what I say. But I think they ended up leaving it because of the size and transportation. I know he did want to take it. But anyway, yeah, I'll just leave it there.
So that's a huge honor, and congratulations for that. You definitely deserve it. I have seen the effort that you put into that, just from some of your video clips and stuff like that. It's just an amazing thing. I'm just totally amazed by your talent. He also.
Yeah. It's kind of wild because I don't know if you guys remember. I've told this story probably too many times, but when he first retweeted the meme, it was obviously really big news back then because he had been dark on Twitter, and then he reposted a random anon account, just their handle on Truth, and then that meme. I mean, since he's posted straight up Q posts since then, but at the time that was the biggest overt Q imagery and messaging he had ever done on social media. So it was a really big deal. And then Media Matters and ADL were covering it, and they kept saying in the article, they're it's unclear whether Trump saw the Q, and then he kept reposting the painting 2 more times, another time randomly a year later. And so it's and I had a Q in my profile picture, and they even whether it was Dan Scavino or Trump, who knows, but they even went to my page instead of reposting from the comments. They ended up going to my page, reposting it from my page directly, which you had to scroll past a bunch of Q posts and memes about him posting the Q painting. And then he ended up, a year later, he like quote truthed it from my page randomly. Like I wasn't even posting it, and he just quote truthed it and said nice. And like it was like 30 minutes before another mass arrest in Saudi Arabia, so the timing was pretty wild. And so I've been like, I'm pretty sure he saw the cue.
Pretty sure he saw the truth.
Yeah, and then when I gave it to him, like I didn't announce it because I was like, I'm gonna leave that whether he's gonna display it publicly or not. Like I just said that I gave him the July 13th painting, and I didn't, I was just like, let's leave that up to him if they're gonna display it. And then sure enough, they hung it, and I was like, I was just waiting for it to come out. And but yeah, it's pretty wild because if he didn't see it before, I mean, come on.
So let me ask.
Right outside the gift shop, by the way.
Let me ask you also, do you still have your clothing line available on your website?
I deactivated it because it was costing too much to run the site.
Okay. So I have to share you a story. When I first started talking,
oh yeah, you have the tie-dye.
When I first started talking to CAG as part of this offline group, off of social media group, I bought a tank top from his clothing store that had a big Q on the front of that. And I posted a picture of me beside my GMC 2500 four-wheel drive truck in that tank top. And CAG says, I love the truck. And I was modeling his shirt, and all I got out of him was, I love your truck. And I'm like, damn, dude. Not I like that shirt, nothing. He liked my truck. So I'll never forget that. I've loved him ever since. So let's see. One Leg Patriot.
Hey, what's up, guys?
Hey.
I just had to pop in. I heard you guys talking smack about Chad.
He's always fun to talk smack about.
If you guys don't know him, you should get to know him. Good human being.
He definitely is.
I mean, he's talked me through hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of miles on the road.
Yep. He's definitely an amazing guy.
Yeah, sure is. And I have 3 of his paintings all signed, so that makes me happy.
All right, tell us which ones you have.
I have the General Flynn, the Trump, and then I have the one with Marina Abramovich, Klaus Schwab, and Fauci, Bill Gates, and Epstein.
Damn. That's crazy.
That's a good bit. I mean, it's so realistic. I'm still amazed to this day. I mean, I have friends that come over and look at him, and you're like, it's so real. It's like an actual portrait.
I know. The day I went to pick up Brian's out of the frame shop, I was stopped by like 4 people on the way out. Where did you get that? Where did you get that?
Yeah. The lady that did the put him on the stretchers for me, she was absolutely amazed. She's like, this is amazing artwork.
Yeah. Yep.
Thank you guys. It's very nice. I appreciate it. Jimmy, I love you.
Love you, brother.
Gotta get going. I'm in the store, but
all right.
Nice talking to you guys.
Thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thank you for all of your posts and truths and helping us get through the fog. Totally appreciate you, CAG.
Yep.
Talented, beyond smart, and a great critical thinker. Thank you, dude.
And the wherewithal to take all the attacks that people have been for going after Israel.
Yeah, he has definitely been attacked nonstop, and he tells the truth as he sees it, and that is critically important for all of us. And that's kind of the whole gist of what we were talking about earlier today. Is you have to, if you're going to learn discernment, you have to take both sides of any conversation and decide for yourself the credibility of the information, not the speaker. Chad brings the heat. He brings facts, and it is up to all of us to listen to both sides of any conversation. And it's funny because the very first conversation that I had with him, we started off on what we thought were opposite ends, only to realize we were both saying the exact same thing. We just came at it from different. And to his credit, he called me to ask me to vet information that he had, because he wanted to know, because he thought I was on the opposite side of the information, and he wanted to either confirm what he was saying or listen to what I was going to give him, because he obviously knows, we talk a lot about it offline on other forums, about Operation Gladio, and he wanted to run his information kind of through my washing machine. And as it turns out, we both agreed on 99% of everything, but we came at it from very different points of view. And that's what's so amazing about all of us collectively being together, and gathering information, because one has enough time in the day to gather all of the information we've been lied to about. And when all of us collectively work together and use each other as sounding boards to say, I just found this. And Warhamster and I do it. We do live digs together. And some of the stuff that you come up with is so crazy. I do it with Bridget literally multiple times a day. Oh my God, you're never going to believe what I found. And so you have to have those people that you can talk to in order to ensure that you're not going to go off on some out of the crazy ballpark here. And sometimes the information is so horrific or so like out of left field, especially with the information that we're looking at, because it's stuff you've never seen before, that you just literally can't believe it's true. And then you find, 4 other sources for it and you realize, oh shit, it is true. And those are the kind of things that happen behind the scenes that no one ever even hears. And that says a lot for people who are genuinely searching for the truth. They are not going to, do grandstands, and you take a lot of arrows. As you've heard me say, I've been called an anti-Semite and an Israeli apologist all on the same day. So that's when you know that what you're working on is truth, when you're attacked from both sides. One leg, go ahead.
So I found this document on, it's called the Israel Project Report, way before Ian Carroll ever fucking thought about it. I'm actually the one that sent that to him. And then he butchered it on Joe Rogan, and then he blocks me after I get in his ass about butchering it. But, there's people out there that's all we do is research.
Yeah.
Everybody goes about it a little bit differently, but at the end of the day, it's got to be 100% true. Because I consider it like, and if I'm speculating, I always tell people I'm speculating on stuff. And I also do podcasts, and it's definitely it's the right thing to do, to make sure that you check your sources and make sure everything is all your ducks in a row.
No, 100% agreed. One of my favorite things is for someone to come to me after a show and say, look, I think you got this wrong. And I go back and I check back in and I go, you know what? You're right. I just got hard. And
yeah, exactly.
Now I can correct myself next time, open the next show with a correction and thank someone. But we're not going to be perfect because our sources are perfect. And that's why it's this whole community, it's a group project. And yeah, I 100% agree with that. And I say this to any of the listeners, if you think I got something wrong, please tell me.
Yeah. So Donnie Vision has a new label for me, an anti-Semitic Israeli apologist. That's going to be my new moniker. Thank
You
you.
guys want to know what I was called at this last the No Kings rally or protest?
What?
I was called a one-legged pirate Nazi.
Well, you would fit right in Tampa because we're all about pirates.
I just need a hook and an eye patch.
Yeah, you'd fit right in Tampa. That's kind of their whole thing is the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. The whole pirate thing is everywhere in Tampa. You just need to move to Florida. You'll fit right in.
I've got a whole costume for you.
I have my own costume. I think I even have a picture of me being a pirate. I'll have to see if I can find that picture. I dressed up one of the first Halloweens when my husband and I were dating. We went to a party and I dressed up as a pirate. I didn't have any of the outfit, but my hairdresser, who was over in Tampa, had the entire thing because she was actually in in a crew that had a float. So a crew is kind of like a club that meets throughout the year, and they have a float in the Gasparilla that is done on Bayshore Boulevard in Tampa. And so I made a pretty good pirate. I'm gonna just tell you.
I actually went as a pirate one year I just carved up a piece of wood and fit it to my prosthetic, and then put like a crutch bottom on it so I didn't slip around.
That's awesome.
I'm gonna post my pirate pics on X later today.
Okay,
I'll always go down to the Caribbean on diving trips during Pirate Week, and I've got some pretty epic pics.
All right, I'll wait for you to do it first, and then I'll post mine.
Fair enough.
Sylvia, go ahead.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Hello, everybody.
Hello.
I'm French. I live in USA from 2009, and I want to congratulate the cat because he's amazing and he has a lot of French followers. I'm translating the video, and Colonel, I want to thank you for everything you are doing. I'm very good friend of General Flynn. I can say hello to Stella, hello. Twisted sister, hello. And I have some French people in your audience. So I want to thank all the American patriots because of you, all the French speakers around the world can understand better what happened here. So this is my word for you. And you know what is crazy? I'm married with an American guy, the best guy ever, and he looks like Trump. You can go to my profile and you will see the picture is from Mar-a-Lago, and this is so funny because I could never imagine I will be like the most French patriot in USA. So thank you for everything you are doing, and I will continue to listen to you. God bless America. God bless the world and make the world great again.
Thank you, Sylvia, for being here. I appreciate that. And thank you for coming up and speaking.
And Sylvia, it's like old times is repeating itself because the French helped us declare independence and win the Revolutionary War. So it's kind of like a deja vu thing.
Yes, General Flynn said this when he made a video with me to say Happy Christmas to the French patriot. And he said, France saved us from the Brittany. So it was very fun. We have a lot of things in common. Thank you.
Thank you.
Wasn't it Lafayette?
Sorry?
Was it Lafayette that came over and helped?
He say, so we make a video together with the General Flynn, and he say Happy Christmas to all my French patriots around the world. And he say, thank you, the French Revolution, because you help us to take off from England.
Cool.
We're going to have a magnificent 4th of July, I believe.
Oh yes, I guess. I hope so, and I cross my finger that the 4th of July will be the 4th of July for the humanity.
Yeah, I agree with that. Okay. everyone. I think we've kind of covered all of our bases here today. We were blessed by a lot of great speakers here, and I am glad they all showed up. I love it. And we will be back. Let's see, tomorrow. I don't know what time we're doing the show. I am going to do a show. I have a particular article that I want to go over with everyone. But we are traveling to Fort Hood. I finally get to see all of my friends that we have not been collectively all back together since I left in 2003 to go take command. I was stationed at Randolph Air Force Base, for those of you that are new, in San Antonio, Texas, and I met a tremendous group of wonderful people. One of the guys that I'd been stationed with at the Pentagon, I pinned on colonel there at San Antonio. He was already a colonel, and he was put in charge of this brand new second lieutenant that had graduated from the academy. He had been a boxing champion for the NCAA for like a couple of years running, and he was in his senior year. During practice for his final fight, which they anticipated him being like a third-time champion in his weight group for the NCAA, he got an eye injury, and as a result of the eye injury, he lost his pilot slot. And my friend that I'd been stationed at the Pentagon with, John Reed, Colonel John Reed, was stationed at San Antonio, who had also been on the boxing team. And weirdly enough, the boxing coach at the academy was still there when our lieutenant went through this horrendous injury. And so he called John at San Antonio and said, hey, I'm going to arrange to get this lieutenant assigned to San Antonio while they go through his medical evaluation to try to get him his pilot slot back. Well, 9 months later, after he had moved in with John and Bonus and adopted my two younger daughters, he was in a band, he played the guitar. My daughter is now in a band because of him. He has just been a close family friend for the last 20 years, the lieutenant. And he pinned on colonel last year, the day my daughter delivered my first grandson. So I was not able to go to his pin-on ceremony in San Antonio, which he had gotten reassigned to San Antonio. But he is what we used to call TACPs, the Tactical Air Liaison Officer embedded in Army units. And he did that for like 15 years. What happened with him was while he was waiting for his medical evaluation, they had temporarily assigned him to be a comm officer, because when you graduate from the academy, you have a 5-year commitment to the Air Force. And the guy was so depressed. He didn't want to be a comm officer. He had pilot set, and that's what he wanted to do. Well, the medical officials approved him to fly as a navigator, just not as a pilot. And so, to make a long story short, I was given the task by this group of people that used to go to the club, to include my friend John Reed, that it was going to be my job, because I was assigned there at the personnel center, even though I had nothing to do with that process, to get him reclassified as a navigator. And I didn't have the flipping clue how I was going to do that, but it got assigned to me to do. And of course I did it, and was able to surprise him one night at the club with his new personnel profile that he was going to navigation school. And so he was a B-52 navigator. He was actually assigned right here at Shreveport, Barksdale Air Force Base for his 5 years as a B-52. And at that point, he retrained into being a TACP. And he was so successful. He's been all over the world. He's deployed in almost every hotspot, calling in air support for Army units in harm's way repeatedly. And he got selected for group command at the last command board. And he is taking over the aviation special operations group at Fort Hood. So I will be there tomorrow, and John Reed, my old buddy from San Antonio and the Pentagon, is going to be there with his wife tomorrow. So we're going to have a reunion, and I will be doing a few shows, but I am not going to be doing a show on Wednesday and Thursday. Thursday is his change of command, and then I'll be traveling on Friday. So my schedule is going to be very off for the next few days. So just stick with me. I will give you guys a notice when I'm able to squeeze in a show, because I've got some really interesting material that I want to share with you. And probably starting next week, we'll start on our next book review. But anyway, I am so excited.
Still on for Wednesday?
Yes, we're still on for Wednesday.
Got it. Yes, I got it on my calendar. I'm ready.
Yeah. Wednesday at noon, I will be with More Hamster for another segment of Secret Societies. But anyway, so excited. Okay.
Colonel Tanner, one last thing too.
Sure.
Thank you again, and have fun and enjoy yourself. And Wednesday's going to be awesome with War Hamster.
Yep.
But with all the stuff that was going on over the weekend, Canada did vote to succeed, or at least 3 of their provinces did vote to succeed from Canada. So that was one thing. There was something else, but I'm sure I'll remember it after the thing closes. But at least that one I thought was Mexico closed the border between Guatemala and them, and there were protests breaking out in different places of Mexico to get rid of their illegals. So those are the 2 things that I found quite interesting, that I thought was fun, with the distraction of Israel and not going to war.
Okay. So, and I will be on Alpha's show, as far as I know. I'm waiting for the final schedule for the change of command, and usually there's a luncheon involved and dinner and stuff like that. So as soon as I get that, I will send out a clarification on my schedule over the next few days. So anyway, it should be coming in probably, let's see, they close in an hour over there. So probably in the next hour. Thank you again, all, for being here. And thank you, One Leg Patriot, for coming in. I appreciate everybody.
Thank you.
All right. I will talk to you guys soon. Take care. All right, guys. We have had a very active chat over here. I love it. Yeah, so thanks, everybody, for being here today. And take care. See you soon.